Welcome to you guys, whoever is here, and thank you so much for joining as well. I appreciate the support that you guys showed all these spaces and the turnout that we have consistently from a lot of you on many of these, covering a broad variety of topics. Today we are joined with Nicolo from the DMY team, the CEO of the DMY team, and I sincerely appreciate you all coming in and taking the time to listen today. For those of you who don't know him, our guest today is Nicola DeMasi, who is the man behind DMY Technology Group, and it's the most consistently successful SPAC franchise we've seen over the past 2 years. His D-SPACs include RSI, GENI, and a recent favorite of ours and a lot of retail traders, which was IONQ. I've been a huge fan of his deal-making prowess, and I've both invested in and covered the progress of all of his D-SPACs and SPACs. As we refer to him on Stock Talk Weekly, the king of SPACs. Today's conversation is going to be focused on another one of Nicolo's SPACs, and that is DMYQ, which will be merging with a very special business named Planet Labs. But before we get into the thick of things, Nicolo, how are you today? And is there anything I missed in that brief intro that you would like the audience to know about you personally before we get into it?
No, hey, I really appreciate the time, everyone, and thank you all for the support, and thank you for hosting, my friend. Happy to do this, from time to time, as and when you guys feel it would be productive. I'm happy to take questions, obviously, on all of our companies. I'm on the board of all of them, although I'd love to spend about half the time on Planet, as obviously we have a vote on December 3rd, and I would be grateful for everyone's support. So if you haven't already voted in favor of that, please use this hour to help me persuade you to. Look, I am based between Austin and San Francisco most of the time, although our companies are across the board. My father's Italian, as you can probably guess, and I'm originally a physicist. I went to Cambridge University in the UK and grew up in a number of cities around the world. So have a big appreciation for all that you guys have done for DMY. We love the fact that you're able to participate in our IPOs and our process. We have a lot of value in our minds for this partnership, and we appreciate your feedback. And we appreciate the diverse set of opinions that I often see on social media through our hosts channel, as well as all the rest of you. So please keep it up, and know that I am always listening, learning, and we're all trying to figure this out together. We are trying to pick great partner companies that we believe can perform well at all stages of every market cycle and all stages of any kind of macroeconomic environment. All of our companies have strategic value, not just fundamental value. And what I mean by that is, they can be sold, and they can be sold at premiums if that's ever, helpful or necessary. All of our companies obviously are underwritten by both DMY and Goldman Sachs, and the last two, IONQ and Planet, are also Morgan Stanley on there. And we work hard to make sure that our transactions are successful for everybody who becomes a shareholder at every stage. We are focused on the long term. We're very focused on companies that can perform well on a kind of 3, 5, 7, 10-year basis. If you close your eyes and come back, we believe they will all pass the Warren Buffett test of only having so many silver bullets you can kind of use up for an investment. And then last thing also to say to kick this off, we're very focused on quality. And we're very disciplined. You can see that all of our deals have stayed in the same size range. We tend to raise SPACs that are kind of $250, $300 million. We don't raise billion-dollar SPACs, even if we could. And because we believe fundamentally that the kind of growth that we can bring to the market for you fine folks is earlier. We love the fact that public markets are receptive now to growth companies. That's where public markets started. Back in the sort of 70s or 80s with Apple and Microsoft. We sort of lost sight of that, I feel like, in the last 5 to 10 years, when the number of public companies went from 20 years ago to about 9,000 all the way down to, I think, 3,000. It's creeping back up. I think we're at 6,500 or so, and SPACs are a big piece of that, right? I think that to power innovation in the future and allow everybody to benefit from the upside, you need all these great growth companies to be public. They can't be kept in the private domains and ownership of KKR, et cetera. Okay, well, look, let me stop there, my friends, and let me know what you'd like me to double click on. I'm happy to jump into any and all questions. I'm all yours for the next hour.
So what we're gonna do is, Nicolo, I have a couple specific questions for you about Planet.
Sure.
So we'll get straight into those. I know you're all for being efficient with our time, so we'll try to do that. I know we have you for about an hour. Am I correct, Nicolo?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, what we'll do is we'll get into a couple of those questions. If you're in the audience and you have a question, Nicholas made it very clear to me that he is absolutely open to that. So send me DMs with your questions. We're not going to bring you guys up individually just because I know there are some people that, are too akin to trolling or asking silly questions. So send me DMs if you have a question, something specific you'd like to ask him. We'll get those screened during the session. And I can throw some of those over to Nicolo towards the end, if that works for you, Nicolo.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, let's just get straight into it. I think, a great place to start would be for those who are, unfamiliar with Planet's business, if, without getting too much into the specifics, because, I'm sure we'll get there through my questions, but if you could just let the audience know, generally what Planet Labs does, what they do, what they're about, just a simple overview of the company. And then I think that'll be a great place to intro into some deeper questions.
Hey, perfect. I appreciate that. So Planet Labs is the pioneer of Earth imaging. They've been at it for about 11 years at this point, and they are a one-stop shop, a vertically integrated business that actually has taken the time. I liken them to Apple Computer of the skies, if you will. They've built their own hardware in the form of they manufacture and design their own satellites. They've built the software on top of that, the AI on top of that, and a data subscription business that ultimately derives their revenue. It's a truly unique business. We believe that this will be not just a 10 bagger, but a 100 bagger in the long term, because data is really the commodity that fuels the global economy in the 21st century. It is, if oil fueled the 20th century, I think data fuels the 21st. And Planet has effectively done already what Google did for the internet, which was to index the internet and make it searchable. Planet has indexed the Earth now for many years. The last 5 to 7 years, it's been capturing most of the Earth's landmass. It captures it now once or twice every day, and it is now able to provide that data about an hour after capture to anybody who subscribes for it. So you can think of it as effectively a Bloomberg terminal subscription model, except that we aren't aggregating data. Planet controls data at the point of capture from their own fleet of 200 existing satellites in orbit. Their competitive position is the most commanding, I would argue, we've seen for a SaaS data business with 9 figures of revenue already. The next biggest, I think, company after them has maybe 8 satellites in orbit, and a lot of them have more like 2 or 3 in the dreams of building, a constellation. But Planet's actually done it. They are now at the point whereby the IPO capital is going to go towards scaling the go-to-market function, the sales function, and adding fuel to the fire on the software and machine learning. What we love about the company is the fact that they've got a 5 to 7 year lead over anybody else, even with unlimited capital, who can attempt to build this 200 satellite constellation. We love the business model. Data is almost always a great business model because there's so many ways to win, right? Every vertical in the Fortune 500 needs this data, whether you're a defense company, logistics company, whether you're insurance, financial services, agriculture, and of course, 3-letter agencies and local governments and state governments and federal governments also care about this data. We're just beginning to scratch the tip of the iceberg about how useful this data is. Planet is building more software solutions to lower the barriers to entry and continue growing the market. But I think there's going to be a lot of excitement on top of this platform, much the way that you've seen, companies like Twitter and Bloomberg grow themselves in the past, 20, 30, 40 years. Data, I believe, and Planet data will power everything from climate change and ESG tracking and measurement through to the future of companies as diverse as Google, Coke, BlackRock. All of these people have participated in our PIPE, as did CPPIB, Canadian Pension Fund, and Mark Benioff. This is Mark Benioff's largest personal investment. And Google is, I believe, the largest shareholder in Planet. They entrusted their satellite ambitions from a number of years back with this company, and obviously Planet powers, Google Maps and Google Earth. So let me pause there, and let me know where you want to take it from there, my friend.
Yeah, that was perfect. I think that was a great introduction, to what the company does. When I first looked at this deal, there were two things that really jumped off the page for me. The first was the metrics of the business, and the second was that massive total addressable market that you kind of touched on right there. I kind of want to start with the metrics. This is a company with 90% recurring revenue, 73% of annual contract value is multi-year, 110% net dollar retention rate, over 700 customers, which I know has been updated in the more recent investors presentations, gross margins of 62% in 2021, and they're seeing a 50% CAGR in all contracts over $1 million. I know you analyze, a lot of companies, Nicola, both in general and by virtue of seeking SPAC targets. Were these financial metrics something that jumped off the page for you, or part of the makeup that drew you to this business as software as a service business, but also as a space business as well?
Yeah, it's a bit of all of the above. I mean, Planet is a space business. It's, I would argue strongly that there's a lot of attention on things like Virgin Galactic, but in the long run, I've never seen a tourism business that's particularly profitable, right, or particularly valuable. Whereas data companies are always profitable. Everybody needs it. Everyone has to pay for it. It's kind of a toll keeper, for the industry. And so, our business is unique in the sense that this is a business that's focused on generating revenue off of the existing economy, right? On the Earth. We're not looking to Mars. We're going to generate the revenue from the Earth. We like data companies. We think space is obviously a unique frontier. It's a space renaissance that is under, that's happening right now in terms of venture capital investment and public market enthusiasm. But ultimately, the lead and the size of the TAM are the kinds of things that get us excited about a long-term investment. If you think about what matters on a 5, 7, even 3-year basis, it's making sure that you have, a quasi, if not actual, monopolistic position. It's making sure that you can, irrevocably grow revenues year after year, and it's making sure that there's such a difficult barrier to entry and ultimately large lead that everybody else that might attempt this will either suffer a losing position or many years of loss before they have any chance of being a viable competitor. Let me give you some statistics which you might find interesting. Planet covers over 300 million square kilometers a day. The next biggest player has 1/100th that number, 1% of that number. So we have 100 times the area coverage. Planet collects 25 terabytes a day of data, and its repository is over 30 petabytes of Earth data over the past 5 to 6, 7 years they've been doing this. They sell to over 700 customers. Anyone else attempting satellite data with like 2 or 3 satellites sells to kind of 3-letter agencies only. And they're just getting started, right? So they're going to have a good $500 million of additional capital here to pour fuel in the fire, continue adding spectral capabilities to these satellites, continue adding software engineers, and growing the sales force dramatically. Mark Benioff, I think is really excited about this business because he's grown Salesforce to the size it is today, and he knows the power of adding qualified sales personnel. I mean, Planet has only about 20 salespeople, I think, last year. And we think there's room for about 10x that number. So I like big TAMs, a lot of ways to win, and big barriers to entry. And when you have those 3 things together, you generally have the time to make sure you can convert your lead into a big revenue business that's ultimately very valuable.
I love that. Yeah. Just on the TAM as well, one thing I found interesting is, as many people know, and you kind of mentioned there briefly, this is the only satellite imaging company that captures the entire surface of the Earth every single day, right? And I think that really opens it up to a variety of micro and macro use cases. And like you mentioned, I know you mentioned a few sectors and industries, but agriculture, defense and intelligence, civil, mapping, forestry, energy, finance, insurance. I mean, these are all trillion-dollar industries, right? And I think that the potential for Planet is really evidenced by how rapidly they're adding additional customers. I mean, if you look at just 2 years ago, right, 2020, their total customer accounts were 316. Now there's 732. I mean, that's 130% jump in net customer accounts in just 2 years. And I know you've talked about, the explosive growth for this company and the potential you have, you believe in them to have to build a moat and, continue to grow market share in this space. But one particular use case out of these infinite use cases, if you will, that I'm interested in is the environmental sustainability aspect, right? We're seeing, world governments propose and enforce, new environmental sustainability goals, new thresholds, metrics, dates that are being put out. I feel like there's a huge two-pronged use case here for corporations that are trying to avoid violations, and also government organizations who are seeking out, these violations. What do you think about that, and what do you think about Planet's place in, environmental sustainability?
So spot on, right? I am, I'm obviously here to create great shareholder bases and great, build shareholder value for everybody involved. So I care about Planet as a great business, and this is a wonderful and unique opportunity to not only get involved with a business that's doing good for our planet and good for humanity, but it's a fabulous business with fabulous tailwinds, right? And those tailwinds, as you rightly pointed out, are coming out of COP26. They're coming out of large institutions like BlackRock demanding more ESG. Same with capital research demanding that this is part of their investment criteria. It's actually a unique opportunity to make money for Planet, because you can't you can't hit your ESG goals if you don't know where you are and you can't measure changes, right? And so all of these people, by people I mean these firms, need to subscribe for Planet data, generally to be able to track their environmental impact and track their progress. And if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? And so, believe it or not, with the regulatory changes that are coming down from federal to state to local, there's an opportunity for Planet to see enhanced, contracts on both sides of the equation. So regulators will want to pay Planet. Companies will want to pay Planet to make sure that they're ahead of where regulators are. And then there's a whole host of people who actually want to be able to track what's going down in the Earth's sea lanes, logistic lanes, shipping, what's coming out of mines. And there's a reason why Koch Industries is in the pipe. They see commodity trading opportunities here. It's not just what's good for the environment, but also what's going to happen to commodity prices. I remember this great article a few months ago in The Economist about a carbon sequestration company that was just putting a sequestration plant online. And they were like sold out and oversubscribed by 5 or 6 times their capacity, I think, the first week they were open. There's so much demand for people to hit various carbon neutral targets that sequestration plant could have sold their credits at 6 times the price. Planet's going to be in a similar position, except that we don't run out of capacity. We're not actually selling a commodity or sequestration capacity. We're selling data. And so we can just mark up the price, and or we can sell a lot more of it. And like I said, everyone in the TAM, from the governments to defense to agriculture, insurance to finance, right? All these people have a different need, have a different reason why Planet's valuable to them, but nevertheless, increasingly can't live without us. And there is no other place to get this area coverage on Earth. No government, no company, no organization.
So, that being said, Nicola, do you feel that going forward, and I know that Planet will continue to expand, their satellite constellation and, their overview and imaging capabilities, but do you really believe that this has become, from a scalability perspective, more of a software and application question because of all these use cases than it has been, necessarily a hardware or infrastructure, growth trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always an interplay, right? I mean, you buy a new iPhone for capabilities, but you also care about the iOS updates. So Planet is always replacing their satellite fleet with new capabilities. I think the average useful life of these satellites is sort of 7 to 10 years, and they, in our financial model, I think it's been modeled as only 3 to 5 years, depending on the actual fleet. We have the lowest satellite cost of launch devices in the world. Planet invented this approach to designing and launching satellites they call agile aerospace, and they've automated a lot of the space systems required to do this. Plus, as I said, they manufacture in-house, which means they can turn an idea into a manufactured and launched item, orders of magnitude faster than everybody else. When you add that all up, you have to move all vectors forward. You want to make sure the hardware platform moves forward, but you want to move the software platform much faster, right? You can do a lot with software with existing hardware. That's true of any ecosystem in consumer electronics around the world. But they will advance both, although software will move faster, and it needs to, and it has a bigger TAM opportunity to move faster. Because at the end of the day, there's not that many people that can ingest Planet's raw data. They like to have it, in a format and terminal that makes it useful for their vertical, right? And so, a lot of what Kevin Wheel, our new president of product, is doing, and Kevin used to run product for Instagram and Twitter. He's used to data companies. He's used to consumer businesses. We're learning from Kevin, and we're thinking about it the same way, which is there's a lot of, if you like to put a lot of dry in this company. He's never seen so much dry kindling. The question is, making sure you commercialize it, serve it up, make it easy to digest, thereby enlarging the TAM kind of every step of the way as we launch more on our roadmap.
I love that. Yeah, no, I think that's a good overview for how you guys are looking to project 3, 4, 5 years down the road and what the business is going to look like going forward. Another interesting thing I think in the use cases that impressed me was that as you mentioned earlier, Google Earth and NASA, many who would view them as either competitors or that would have vertically integrated products that they could rely on themselves, are actually deferring to and employing Planet Labs to refine and support their own projects and missions. So, I think that really speaks to the level of their lead in this space, and how some of the biggest organizations and most recognized organizations in the world for satellite imaging are actually relying on Planet. So, I thought that was very interesting. But, Nicola, just kind of to touch on this competitive advantage that you've brought up, and I've heard you in other interviews discussing this as well, but you believe Planet is 5 to 7 years ahead of competitors. And while I agree with you completely, I think part of it becomes who that's on the public markets. Which public companies do you specifically view as direct peers or competitors to Planet, if there are any? And granted, understandably, knowing that you and I both agree that they are 5 to 7 years ahead of any potential competitors that they might have, but who on the public markets do you view as their peers?
Yeah, so I don't think they have any peers on the scanning side. That's just a fact, right? So you could take every other satellite company in the world, including governments, and say, go and scan the Earth, and they wouldn't come to, I think, 10% of the 300 million square kilometers that we scan every day. On the zooming side, the high resolution tasking business, Planet has a high resolution tasking business. We have 20 satellites that can revisit and record video, I think at 50 centimeter resolution on small areas. This is the three-letter agency, Abbottabad compound, go find Osama bin Laden type moment, watch the SEALs go kick the door down. That use case. That is a minority of Planet's revenues. It's about 20%, 23%, something like that. But because we have so much revenue overall, that 23% is about the same size as all of Black Sky or all of Terran Orbital, which I think is also trying to go public or has. And so to put it in perspective here, Planet is effectively, it's a larger zooming business and more satellites than a Black Sky or a Terran, because we've got 20 zooming satellites and they've got, I think, 8 or 5 or 2. But we also have another 180 satellites that are just doing the scanning, and everyone else has 0. Basically 0 or close to 0, right? A lot of people, and there's some confusion in the market on this one, there are a lot of people that have business plans that involve launching satellites, manufacturing satellites in the next 3 to 5 years. But as Will Marshall always like to remind me, we have 200 satellites in orbit. Everybody else has PowerPoint satellites. And so the reality here is, PowerPoint satellites take a long time to turn into actual satellites that are stable, operating, and automated in orbit, right? And so I think that when you stand back, there are some people in the zooming business that do something similar to us. We think all the growth's in the scanning business, because the zooming business tend to be a governmental business, whereas the scanning business tends to be a commercial business and a government business. So, we could sell, and maybe some examples. Take any of the 7 verticals in our investor presentation, agriculture, government, insurance, finance, et cetera. Just on governments alone, how many governments do you think are willing to pay $5 to $10 million a year for a scan of their country and what's happening in that country every day? That's a very cheap price for that, if you think about it. Tracking emergencies, large movements of people, cars, logistics, et cetera. That's very, very valuable for a national government to have. I would argue that probably there's 100 companies, because there are 100 countries that will happily pay $7, $10 million a year, right, to have that capability. Planet has so far only been catering to inbound sales leads. They've done very little outbound. They have very few of the countries knocked down. There's probably 100 more to be had. Now, look, if 100 countries pay $5 to $10 million each, that's your entire long-term model in the investor deck on one vertical alone, right? That gets you to the 600 million of revenue in one vertical. Then you can move on to agriculture and defense and all these other ones, finance, insurance, and find people who will pay a lot more. Even if there's not 100 of them, there's going to be a lot more of them for, say the top 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 customers, right? So this is a really big long-term compounding platform. It reminds me the most of what it's like to invest in, a Google in 2001, right? It wasn't clear how big internet search was going to be in 2001. And yes, there were other people like Yahoo and Alta Vista trying to do search. Microsoft Bing is sort of still around, but I don't think anyone would say that search is anything other than a winner takes most or winner takes all market. Whole Earth data will be in the same bucket. It'll be winner takes most. I'm not going to say there won't be a Bing, to our Google capability, but this is going to be a market that currently we're the monopolist in. We're going to be a monopolist for a number of years, if not many years to come. We're not standing still. We're adding capabilities, but most of all, we're locking the customers into us. And as I always like to put it, if you learn on a Mac, you stay on a Mac, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think that's a huge point. And I know you brought up Black Sky. What I've been seeing on Twitter a lot from the competitive perspective is people bringing up Maxer Technologies and Black Sky. But, based on the research that I've done, it's quite, they're just not comparable. If we look at the Earth observation satellite constellation, and I know you touched on this, Nicolo, but, Planet Labs, and again, for those of you who are unfamiliar, when we're referring to Planet, we're referring to DMYQ, which is Nicolo's SPAC that'll be merging with Planet. The shareholder meeting is on December 3rd. So that's just a point of order to clarify for those who may be tuning in just now. But, Maxer has 4 Earth observation satellites. Black Sky has 8. Planet has over 200, right? So they're really just not even in the same league competitively. And so I tend to agree with you on that, Nicolo. And one thing I found interesting was in 2020, there were a few articles about SpaceX, becoming the largest privately operated satellite constellation. And it was funny because the reigning champion was Planet Labs at that time. And I think they're still number 2 just behind SpaceX. So that's really incredible to think, considering, SpaceX is, as we know, privately, being valued well over $100 billion. And their satellite capabilities are, a significant component of that drives their valuation. So, I found that very interesting to see that SpaceX really was, not viewed as a peer necessarily, but the only other company with a comparative privately operated satellite constellation. So, and I know you've spoken on that as well, Nicolo, just really that they're so far ahead of peers that it's not even, comparable.
No, I think that's right. And I like to jokingly say, and this is not really a joke, it's true. Planet's been going for so long that there's a lot of companies that raised venture capital saying that they're going to, follow them, right? And so I jokingly like to say, like, a lot of companies' only proof point they can even do what they say they're going to do is Planet. It's like they hacked their business model and their, on their investor deck off of our website. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
look, not to be too much of a smart ass about this, but I can't resist sometimes. It's like, I have an EV startup in my garage. I mean, you don't know this, but I do. Why? Because I have a PowerPoint deck that says I'm going to build an EV manufacturing company and it's going to kick Tesla's ass. Do you believe that? I mean, somebody might, right? But Tesla has a pretty solid lead over my EV startup that I haven't yet started working on, but I'm just making a joke out of in my office here, right? Like, there's lots of EV startups. Obviously, Tesla's got $1 trillion market cap. How long have they been making cars? About 10 years, 8 years, 9 years? Everybody else is just starting to make cars, right? Or trying to start making cars in the next 2 years. It's really hard in technology markets to catch up when you're 1 year behind. When you're 5, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I mean, how many of you would honestly back my EV startup that hasn't started yet and taking on Tesla? Right?
I'd back it.
Not
No, I'm
I
kidding.
will.
and
Take you
that's
public 1 month
okay.
back and 20 billion.
That's kind
revenue.
of you, right? And I appreciate the support, gentlemen. But realistically, it's as challenging as taking on Apple, right? Like I'm starting a mobile phone company to take on Apple. I mean, it's really hard. You're talking to somebody who tried to do that with Andy Rubin, and we weren't terribly successful, in 2016 and 17. Like it's really hard, even when you're Andy Rubin and you invented the Android operating system. It's really hard, right? Big
No.
hardware, software challenges, distribution challenges.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. One thing also that really impressed me about this business that I don't think necessarily a lot of people understand is that their satellite program is really just completely vertically integrated, right? They design, build, and deploy their own satellites. What, competitive advantages do you feel like that gives them over competitors that may not do the same, or maybe, sourcing some of these components or design programs from other companies? One thing I noticed, which I'm sure you're familiar with this metric as well, I'm just sharing some of these for the audience, but, in the last 5 years, they've had a 5-fold improvement in data per day per satellite at the exact same cost. So I think that's one of the advantages. But if you wanted to just speak on, Nicola, just on their, the fact that they design, build, and deploy their own satellites and how you feel like that's really going to help this company scale.
Well, I think it's critical at all cycles of the business model. So during the pandemic, and this is kind of comical, other companies were calling up Planet asking them for parts because there's big supply chain problems, but like we build our own stuff in-house, right? So of course we don't sell components to anybody else, but it kind of gives you an example, right, of how important this lead is from a, call it, shelter-in-place downside protection perspective. On the upside, what having this capability does for us is it allows us to move faster, right? Innovation is all about speed and turning a flywheel, right? Can you turn an idea on a piece of paper into a prototype, then into something you manufacture, then into something you get up into the air, right? And in Planet's case, particularly with the partnerships they have with people like SpaceX, they can get their their birds up in the sky from a piece of paper, an idea that Will Marshall might have, into an actual operating satellite that adds data and plugs into their network with all the automation systems and the practice they've had. Hardware and software and operational capabilities take years to build up, right? I mean, you guys probably follow the geopolitical, wars that are playing out slowly but surely in the Pacific Ocean, and it's like, look, some people are building up hypersonic, missiles that can maybe knock out aircraft carriers. Other people recognize that nobody's got as much experience as the U.S. military does in carrier operations. Why? Because we've been at it since what, 1940 or even earlier, right? Maybe in the 30s. Everybody else is building their first aircraft carrier now. Now, I'm not saying that a single satellite is challenging as an aircraft carrier, combat squadron, but the principles are the same, which is nobody else has been, we've launched 400 satellites at Planet. 200 of them are currently still up in the air over the last 10 years. We're constantly replenishing it. But think about all the energy that goes into managing and automating a 200 satellite fleet when everybody else is trying to just build the first one to send up. I mean, it's not credible and it's not comparable, right? And so we'll continue to add to our lead. My partner, Harry Yu, was the CFO of Oracle, Accenture, EMC. Harry always makes this great point, which is, they made, I think, 100 acquisitions when he was, effectively the CFO of EMC, and they had a consulting report commissioned by one of the top tier firms, I think it was Bain, and they looked at the difference in returns against the NASDAQ, average, if you buy the number one player in a sector versus number two versus number three. On average, the number one player in a hot tech sector will outperform, the NASDAQ composite tech index by like 10x. The number two player is like 2x. The number three player is like half the index. And that shows you the difference between small leads typically in software and coding. In our case, right, we control the whole value chain. So we have better margins. We can move faster. We can add new capabilities faster. We can replace things. We're more robust. We're more resilient, right? And on top of all of that, we already have the birds in the sky, the capabilities, the team, and the automation systems around that, right? So our margins are going to be higher. Our revenue is going to be bigger. It is really hard for me to believe that companies that have $20 million of revenue are going to catch up to companies that have, whatever, $130 million of revenue this year. Particularly given that, we have the know-how, expertise, the customers, a much broader fleet, and now we're going to have the capital and the profile in the public markets. I mean, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that Planet is probably going to become a verb at some point, right? Just like Google did. I think that Planet will become a verb, and it'll be a standard, right? It'll be a standard for not just emissions tracking, but it'll be a standard effectively for, observing the Earth. And every company that I can think of will have a need for using that data to support a portion of their business.
I love that description. Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain how, that vertically integrated satellite program is going to give them, just another leg up on top of, the edge and data and so many other software and use cases that they already have. What I'd like to do from here, Nicolo, is I have a couple panelists up here. I just want to touch and see if they have any specific questions for you, if that would be okay with you.
Of course, I'm all yours, guys.
Awesome. So I don't know if SPAC Track, or I know that MPAM Man had a question for me. So why don't you go for it, bro?
Hey, Nicolo, thanks for the question. I guess one point I'd make and then follow up with a question. I think with these companies, it's really about how you process and analyze the data and then give it to, customers in a usable form. I think that's probably something that's not appreciated. When you're collecting terabytes of data, you're trying to sell it to customers. They don't have the time to look through all this stuff, and so
exactly
to the extent the company has that capability, which Planet's been doing for a long time, that's critical. But my question, I actually had someone who is interested in Planet, in addition to myself, of course. And I guess, how would you compare what you're doing relative to Digital Glow, which I believe is owned by Maxar?
Well, let's stand back. So Maxar doesn't build their own satellites. They tend to outsource this to Lockheed, right? I think that I'm actually not, I'll be honest, I'm not hugely familiar with this initiative of theirs because we don't run into it. Obviously Maxar demonstrates that you can make a lot of money just from zooming and just kind of three-letter agencies. And that gives me hope, by the way, that the minority of Planet's revenues that comes from zooming and high resolution can grow faster. But we're not counting on it. We don't need the zooming market for this to be a company that can do billions of dollars of revenue. We think the scanning market is the much bigger TAM. I think everybody, and they're not the only company, by the way, that is currently telling some participants of the market that they'll be able to edge into Planet's, let's call it, business model down the road. But they're gonna, they have a chance to edge in 2025 and beyond. I don't have a chance to edge in 2022. And again, we're not standing still, so we're not complacent. We're always, cautiously optimistic, but also healthily paranoid about making sure that we not just maintain our lead, but we extend our lead, right? And I think you're correct in the point you made 3 minutes ago. Storing, petabytes of data is not trivial. Making it accessible for customers is not trivial. And there's a lot of money that we know we're leaving on the table by not making our data more accessible. The analogy that my dear friend Kevin Wheel, our president of product, always uses is, when he was running product at Twitter, they first tried to commercialize what they called the fire hose. Like, hey, we'll give you all of the tweets, just pay us a lot of money for them every day. And of course, almost nobody could use all the information, right? Google is probably one of the only customers who say, oh yeah, well, we'll take it all raw, right? And they can ingest it, do something with it, and perform their, sentient and sentiment analysis and so on. For everybody else, you got to bundle it up and productize it, right? Planet has a repository of data back into time. Obviously, nobody else has a time machine, right? And so tracking changes is very powerful for a lot of industries over time, showing how weather and other changes impact the Earth has been really useful already, but it'll be more useful with more tools. The other thing I would say is that data fusion is really powerful. So as we add new spectral bands, as we sort of announced with things like Carbon Mapper, This will give us, yet more layers to intertwine with the existing data and sell to both existing customers, and new customers. So, look, I like to back companies that are, that are first to category, markets of one, have every chance of cleaning up. And we think Planet's the 800-pound gorilla today. We think that 800-pound gorillas in the tech markets tend to become 900-pound gorillas and 1,000-pound gorillas. And with this capital and your support, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pick up a lot more customers, hire a lot more salespeople, and make sure that we become, a standard for both governments and industry alike.
Perfect. I don't know if that answered your question, Pen.
No, that's it. Thanks.
Perfect. Awesome. I don't know if Mystic or Gurgavin or SpacTrack have any other questions. If
Yeah,
not,
I got one.
we're going to transition. Go for it.
Thanks for being here with us today, Nicolo, and thank you to Stock Talk Weekly for hosting and allowing me to be up here on the panel with you all. Really awesome to be here. Nicolo, as you're, of course, intimately aware, over the past couple of years, once one player in an emerging technology industry takes the SPAC route, the rest kind of follow suit and in large parts and let their peers get the advantage or at least to catch up. As you noted, Planet has quite the head start over its peers. And it was actually interesting that Satellogic announced a merger deal the day before DMYQ and Planet. But as Planet's been around for over 10 years, I believe, did the multitude of other space tech companies entering the public markets via SPAC have any influence on Planet going that direction as well, or was it simply the right time and the right partners in DMY? Thank you.
Yeah, good question, and great to hear you. Appreciate the thoughtful questions from everybody here, and I appreciate the moderation as well. You guys are doing a great job here. Planet has been a great company for a long time. It's been well known for a long time. It's got obviously impressive investors, shareholders, and an impressive board. I first talked to them actually on my first SPAC, and I sort of fell in love with this business, back in late 19, early 20. I would say that it took time for them to decide that going public was something they wanted to do in any format. They then obviously spent a lot of time thinking through the various options they had, whether it's direct listing, S1 process, or as I put it, our S4 process. What ultimately got them, I think, comfortable that we could do justice to a company with this big an opportunity, this big a mission, and ultimately this significance to, I would argue, humanity, is partially I'm a physicist, and I think Will understands. I understand how difficult it is to accomplish what he has. Part of it was that Harry, you and I, my SPAC partner at DMY, had a lot of experience with data businesses, and part of it was the fact that we had demonstrated with IONQ that we could explain a cutting-edge science business very successfully to the public markets, get the right investors into the pipe who were taking long-term perspectives, and use the extra time that the SPAC process affords us to not only engage interesting long-term potential customers in the pipe, but get the great participation from fine folks in retail like yourselves. And these are big differentiators for me and DMY from an S1 IPO process. And so Planet, could have been first. They could have done this 2 years ago. It might have been an even bigger, bolder moment, given that Richard Branson had gone out with zero revenue. And as I said to Will Marshall 2 years ago, well, if zero revenue works, how about 9 figures of revenue for the space category? And still today, 2 years later, I think it's still 9 figures of revenue for Planet, and not a lot for, unfortunately, Mr. Branson, other than kind of a backlog of pre-orders. I expect everyone on this call that over the coming years, I expect that Planet will become the most valuable company in the space category. And the reason for this is they have the revenue, they have the data, and in the long term, there just is not a lot of money in tourism. There's not a lot of money in transportation, right? Rocketry. A lot of people can put things up into orbit. There's only one planet with 200 satellites that can capture the entire Earth's landmass, 300 million square kilometers, once or twice a day, right? And we're going to get better at a faster rate than people are going to catch up. Catching up, almost impossible these days in tech markets. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but this has been fascinating to me in the last 20 years of my career. Have you noticed how much bigger, the Amazons, Googles, Microsofts, Apples have become relative to the rest of the tech market? right? So in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, big tech companies like Google IPO'd at what, a $5 billion market cap? Apple IPO'd as a $600 million market cap, early 80s. Microsoft, similar size, late 70s, I think. Look at them now and look at how economies of scale have driven growth, right? So success begets success in the tech markets because there's networks around user data predominantly, as well as in the ability to hire, attract, retain, make acqui-hires and acquisitions that accelerate growth. Planet's already made an acquisition, and we intend to make many more as a public company to bolster success here and accelerate success. So every reason to believe here that we will also be able to scale and suck the oxygen out of the room, as I like to put it, relative to everybody else that might attempt something adjacent to what we're doing.
Awesome. Does that answer your question, Spec?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, appreciate the background. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Mystic, you have a question for him, and then after Mystic's question, we'll get into some wrap up.
Yeah, just one quick question. Maybe this is information's out there, but I haven't come across it. As far as Planet's relationship with Google, what exactly, what is that? If I'm looking at Google Maps, is that data coming from Planet? If you could just talk about that partnership and what Google gets from Planet, really appreciate it.
Yeah, so Google is an existing shareholder. They're also a PIPE participant. Planet bought Google's satellite initiative about 5 years ago and merged it in. And that's both a testament to Planet and their vision, but also the caliber of their people, right? So Google decided that if they were going to entrust anybody with their ambitions in low Earth observation, it was going to be Planet, right? That partnership comes with a contract that is continually being expanded and renewed. We do not supply all of Google Maps, but the reality is to keep the maps up to date, they need to keep track of what's going on, from the kind of resolution, the kind of land mass scanning that only Planet can supply. Roads can get dug, things can move around, construction sites can go up, and there's all sorts of changes that happen all the time with roads. And Planet's data allows Google to use, their own machine learning to automatically update maps. So it's one of the reasons why Google probably has the best mapping system still.
So it's not the actual images, but it's just together. But so it's not the actual images that Planet's giving. Planet's giving them updated images, which allows them to use their AI to sort of transfer that onto the imaging that you get on a Google Map.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Google Earth, maybe a different story. But I can't profess to be an exact expert on this. Believe it or not, the reason I'm an expert is this is an important contract, but it's not like it's a double-digit % of Planet revenues, right? They've got 700 customers, and it's really a nicely diversified company.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the deck, and you have these 7 different verticals with, each of them by themselves very. I'm just, curious from your, personal aspect, which one of those verticals is, has you the most excited about where that could, grow in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think the first 4 on the left side are kind of the most proven out today. I think the last 3 have the most growth, and I think financial services has, I would argue, always great room to run. Imagine the trading advantages you have if you can track what's coming out of all the mines around the world every day, right? Imagine the advantages you have if you know where tankers are getting stuck. Advantages you have if you know what's going on with natural disasters and large movements of people, and all of these things can play into financial markets, right? Even what's going on with opposing, navies and fleets, you can see from Planet's resolution and whole Earth scan. It's really, really powerful, right? So every time somebody finds a new missile base in Western China, Planet doesn't always get the credit. It's usually in a footnote, but Planet is the one that finds and supplies the data. So we are the ultimate, as I once put it on, I think Benzinga, we're the ultimate thing behind a thing company, right? Everybody needs this data, regardless whether you're a journalist or you are, Koch Industries, or you're running a prop trading arm somewhere. But in general, I think industries that have infinite scalability, like insurance and fintech, I think those industries can have a lot of traction here by being the first person to figure out how to take this data, productize it, and actually trade off of it.
That's awesome. Just one last question, and probably a question. We appreciate talking to the retail investor that I know a lot of retail investors are curious about. We all share your, if we looked into the company, the 10x, the 100x, it's a very exciting opportunity. So we need to get those deep out of the money options. So when's the DMYQ option listing coming? Or I don't know if you have any say in that, but with IONQ, a lot of people putting a lot of research and time into it, and we're able to, leverage
Just
their bets
email
on
the
that.
CBOE. They'll list options.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for those that wonder, I have no influence over the clocks, the calendars, and how all this sort of procedural stuff happens, right? So it's pretty much set out by, the SPAC powers that will be. I agree that, the warrants or out of my warrants are hopefully great trading opportunities in every one of our companies. But and I see this on social media sometimes, but I don't get to decide when a unit separates. What I do know for a fact is anything you buy now in DMYQ, any warrants you buy now, they all map over. I get questions usually over email, sometimes on social media, every time we close a deal, where people are like, "Will it convert?" I'm like, "Yes, it all converts. If you buy a share of DMYQ, it will convert to PL, the new ticker. Probably on December 7th, I think at this point." And same goes for all the warrants. So you guys are probably much bigger experts than I am on the entire warrant situation. And I'm cheering you on, and I hope you all do well out of your positions, however you decide to play it.
Awesome. I appreciate you answering those, Nicolo. Wolf, did you have a brief question you wanted to ask as well before we get into wrap up here?
Yes, sir. Two quick questions. Thanks for doing this, Nicola. The first one is
Anytime.
Yeah, so the first one is, as you're scanning, right, worldwide daily, are there potential privacy regulations that could get run to, potential legal problems with, I guess the scanning and mapping, especially when we're talking about how you can, zoom in so closely onto everything. Is there any problems that could be run into in that direction? And then the other one is, you mentioned that, a large part of the revenue is going to come from selling this data to external countries, potentially for $10 million a year. What would the utility be of the data for them? What would they specifically be using it for? Would they be classifying it as defense or something else? Yeah, those are my two questions.
Yeah, both great ones. I appreciate the quality of this from everyone, and again, the moderation's been awesome. You guys have been way more thoughtful than most, if not many institutional investors and group calls I've done. So I really appreciate it. Look, Planet high res gets down to 50 centimeters. The scanning is 3-meter resolution. And so, as Will Marshall always likes to point out, you can't really identify a person from either of those. You can count the number of walruses and the number of polar bears, if you will. But data privacy is something we believe in and something we respect despite the resolutions that we offer. There is a treaty, apparently, I didn't know this, I learned this working with Planet. There's a treaty signed decades ago, apparently, that allows satellites to pass overhead of any country and allows satellites passing over any country to capture whatever they can capture. Obviously, this was put in place when the U.S. had a commanding lead from a governmental side, and it was also probably quite secret what their capabilities were relative to the Soviet Union. But it's a big benefit to us. So we can capture the whole Earth every day, and there's no organization or law that says we can't. The only thing that prevents us or limits us is obviously we can't do business with non-friendly governments. And that's, we wouldn't be selling our data to non-friendly governments, even we could. But obviously that's why I say there's 130, 40 countries in the world. I'm assuming in my kind of back the envelope TAM that, you probably get 100 of them. Probably 100, 103 out of the 130 or 40, whatever the number is, you can probably sell a contract to. And they'll use the data for different reasons, depending on what the country is up to. There are some countries very focused on forest management and forestry. Some are focused on natural disasters. Others, like the U.S., even the states of California and sub-counties within California, they care about things like, you might all laugh, cannabis permitting, right? So you can see all of this from Planet Scan. Like, are people abiding by the permits they've paid for various crops or higher value crops in some cases? You're also going to see, I think, yes, a defense angle. I mean, Will always likes to joke that he gets, he's been called in the past by various governments going like, where is the Chinese fleet? And, it's kind of amazing that that's a question. But without Planet, you can't find the Chinese fleet if you don't know where it is, right? Everybody else can kind of zoom on the Abbottabad compound. But if you don't know where the Abbottabad compound is, you can't say search all of Pakistan, right? Planet can show you where the Chinese fleet is within all of Pakistan, right? So yeah, look, I mean, everyone's got a different angle here. I think logistics companies care. I think insurance is really easy to keep, to keep track of how fires are raging, what's going on with, coastlines changing. Mapping's pretty clear. And I always like to remind everybody that, because we drive maps, imagine all that goes on top of maps. I mean, even games like Pokemon require Google Maps, right? So there's a lot that is underpinned by Planet. We're really a foundational data layer. And so we should be able to take, a small carry in the long term out of kind of everybody's digital business in the coming, decades, because I think digital transformation and sustainability flow right down the tracks that, that Planet Labs is effectively laying here. Did I get both your questions?
I believe you did. Did he answer both of those for you, Wolf?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
All
yeah.
right.
So yeah, go for it, Nicola. What's up?
Say we have one more, or was that? I mean, is there anything you're moderating, my friend? So, is there anything we haven't covered that you feel?
Yeah, I know we're getting low on time here, and I don't want to hold you. I know you're a busy guy. I wanted to touch on some of your D-SPACs. I know that a lot of people who are interested in DMYQ, have been investors in the DMY franchise before, especially the retail investors. I know we probably won't have time to get to IONQ, RSI, and Genius, but looking through the questions I got from the audience. And I understand you may not be able to answer this in every aspect, but just answer whatever you feel comfortable with, Nicolo. But
Sure.
One question I did get was what your reaction was to Genius's earnings today. Obviously, not a fantastic day in the market overall, and there was a pretty steep sell-off. But
Yep.
there were earnings that I looked at, and again, Nicolo, keep granted, I know that you don't concern yourself too deeply with the intraday price action or the day-to-day price action of all of the companies that you're involved in, but for me, seeing them raise guidance, seeing that statistic that 97% of the digital sports betting market is now using NFL data exclusively through Genius, it was very encouraging to me, purely from an operational and execution standpoint. I know there was a miss on EPS, and perhaps the market didn't really respond to that, but again, one question I got from the audience, a lot of people have asked that, is just what your reaction was to Genius's earnings. Do you feel like they're still on pace? Is your thesis and bullishness on the company still intact, which I'm sure it is, because again, I know you don't concern yourself with that day-to-day price action. But yeah, if you just wanted to touch on Genius for a little bit, and then we can get to a wrap up.
Of course. Yeah, look, so I'd love to repeat this. We can go 30 minutes on maybe each of RSI, Genius, and IONQ next time. Let's just find time, and I'm happy to do it, relatively soon if it's helpful to you guys. Let me say a couple things. One, obviously, I have a big personal position in all of these companies, so I'm an investor too, and so I do care about trading action like today. I mean, of course, it concerns me, and I'm a board member, and so is my partner Harry, and so I can assure you that we are going to do all we can to drive a proper revaluation of the business. I think what has happened today, and I haven't had that much time to catch up with every investor and analyst that was on the call, but I think you're correct that the EPS. Let me put it this way: more people cared about the bottom line than I think a number of large shareholders who are around the company have been telling the management team and have been focused on the past 6 months. So this is a business that was breaking even when we marketed the pipe last October, and I think the pipe forecast for this year was 190 of revenue. That guidance number has moved up repeatedly all the way to 262 today, and it's still a break-even business. I think that there was a number of people that were expecting obviously more bottom line, and I think the management team may have guided to more, otherwise it wouldn't be an EPS miss. Although EPS is different than EBITDA, and so people focus on different levels of earnings at times as a management team and as a board. But you're correct. None of this changes my long-term view in the business. It is a data company. Also, it's a toll booth company. We're listed in the risk factors of DraftKings and their IPO. They can't operate without Genius, and Genius has demonstrated that by securing exclusive rights in the NFL, everyone from FanDuel to DraftKings to Rush Street, everyone has to pay for it. So if you believe that more states are going to liberalize sports betting in the U.S., and we're only at 9 states or whatever it is, and there's going to be another 30 to go. If you believe more in-game wagering is happening, if you believe that international sports betting and the other 250,000 events they control rights to, including the EPL, are going to lead to the kind of revenue growth that many analysts have predicted macroscopically, then this is going to translate to Genius. Now, Genius as a company, is taking a longer term view in how they invest in technology. They believe that they need to be a cutting edge, sports technology company, and they want to embed themselves in that ecosystem. I think they have a powerful vision around how video and broadcast and in-game wagering will come together, and they have strong proof points from more mature markets like the UK. Part of what happened today, as best I can tell, and I wasn't on the call because I was talking to some fine folks like yourself about Planet at the same time this morning. But part of what I think happened is they need to provide revenue guidance for next year. If you're going to focus on revenue growth, you need to make sure you're communicating revenue growth. But I think it's safe to say that when you see the kind of revenue outperformance they've had the last 3 quarters of 2021, there's going to be continued strong revenue performance for next year, right? They are very, very focused on growing market share. Amazon did the same thing for a long time, and look at them now. This is a group of long-term thinkers, and Apax, of course, is still the largest shareholder, has 3 board seats, and they control, I think, 35% of the company still. And so all of us take note when there's price action like today. All of us, I think, believe Genius is doing the right thing for the long term. I think there's been some sentiment shifts in the past 9 months between B2C versus B2B. So I've looked at RSI that was at $25 at one point, then ran down to 12, and came back to wherever it is, 19 or 20 today. Genius has done the same thing. I think it's run down. I think it'll run back up. It might take more than an hour for it to do that. But at the same time, this is a company with huge strategic value, as all of our businesses have, right? And so, I think it's safe to say that the board, the management team, we're always going to think about how we drive shareholder value over the long term. And we're always looking after you guys. So appreciate you keeping the faith on that one and all the rest of these. And I can tell you that, Harry, you and I take our track records super seriously. We are super focused on having worked so hard to be at the top of the SPAC league tables. Days like today, they hurt us. I don't think I'm number 1 today after the Genius price action. So we're very focused on getting from number 2 to number 1, or where we are today.
You still are.
Okay, I still am. All right, well, that might be because of IONQ. So we thank IONQ, and we thank all of you for your support on that one. But ultimately, we want to stay at number 1. We want your support. We take your trust super seriously. We take institutional trust super seriously. And Harry and I care about nothing more than our long-term reputations with all of you, because we can't be successful without you.
I love that. Yeah, no, I appreciate you answering that, Nicolo. I know that it was a question that a lot of retail shareholders in Genius had today for you. So I'm sure that
Of course
helped reinstill some faith in that shareholder base. So I appreciate you answering that. But I know that we've run a little bit over time here, and I know, of course, you're a busy guy, so we don't want to keep you. So we'll get into a bit of wrap up. Like you said, I would love to have you back to discuss the D-SPACs, RSI, GENI, IONQ. So, we'll try to arrange something for that in the short term here, whenever you get time, for those that are interested in those names. For those of you who came to hear about those names, sorry, we got into a little bit of, which I thought was a great conversation about Planet, and hopefully it was informative to many of you. So for those of you who don't know, the ticker that we've been discussing today for the vast majority of this session was DMYQ. And it is going to be merging with Planet Labs. The shareholder meeting is on December 3rd. I believe, as Nicolo said earlier, with an approval, you can expect that ticker change by December 7th. So that is just to let you guys know what we were talking about specifically. I want to tell Nicolo, thank you so much for doing this. I've been a huge fan of yours and your deal making prowess for a while now. So, having you on here to discuss Planet and discuss some of these other names has been really rewarding for me and hopefully for the audience as well, and our panelists also. So, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to do this with us. For those of you who are not following Nicolo, go follow this man. If you're interested in SPACs, he's a legend in the SPAC community. As we've said today, the best performing SPAC sponsor. So drop Nicolo a follow, drop all of the panelists a follow as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. I mean, we had nearly 1,000 people here at the peak today, which is phenomenal for, a Spaces interview, really focused around one topic. So that was great to see. I appreciate all of you who take the time to come and sit in these for an hour or an hour and a half or whatever it may end up being. So, Nicolo, with that being said, I want to go to you if you have any closing remarks, whether it's on Planet or on the DMY franchise in general, anything that you want to wrap up with and kind of leave these retail shareholders with to think about.
Yeah, look, first of all, I want to thank you all for your support for the last couple of years, and I look forward to your support, in many more deals. We're going to always keep working hard to find, hidden gems we can bring to the market that you guys can all participate in and do well with. I really appreciate, the moderation on this. This has been a pleasure. I'd love to do this again. Just send me a direct message or a text or whatever, and let me know your schedule, and let's do this again for IONQ, RSI, and Genius. The principles we're using for all of our deals are the same, even though the sectors are a bit different. And so we are confident that if you close your eyes and leave these shares behind for your children and grandchildren, you're going to do well on every single one of these. And DMY's team, Harry, you, and Nicola Damasio are going to always be working every day of every week to make sure that we get those returns for you. We know at the end of the day that our franchise is really about you guys. And as long as we're successful with you guys, first, second, and third, the ecosystem works. Without you guys and the quality and the sort of depth of thought that we've had and depth of question today, I know that we wouldn't be able to bring such great companies to market and have the same reception. So please keep doing what you're doing, and know that I'm always interested in your opinions. I'm always around, always interested in feedback, and I appreciate all that you guys do to spread the word. I think social media and digital media has been really revolutionary, particularly during the pandemic. For this SPAC IPO process, and I'm really heartened by statistics like we had 1,000 people on this at peak. That's just amazing to me. I can't get institutional investor meetings. Group calls there are like 10 or 15 or 18, and yes, they manage a lot of money, but in terms of kind of getting the word out here, like this has been really exciting to me. I've had a great hour and a bit with you guys, and I really look forward to doing more of these. So let's keep in touch, and I'll see you shortly, I'm sure, back on Twitter.
Awesome, Nicolo. I love that. Glad to have done this with you, and we'll definitely, I'll be shooting you a text, and we'll arrange something for IONQ and the other D-SPACs as well. Again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Just once again, go give Nicolo Damasio a follow. Just really intelligent guy, well-spoken, as many of you heard today. And he stands behind his companies. That's a great thing that we love to see from SPAC sponsors who are on the boards of their D-SPACs, who, despite what it may be, the ups and downs and the price action, I love seeing, a SPAC sponsor stand behind the companies that he helped bring public. So drop him a follow. Thank you so much, Nicolo, for coming on this. And sorry it took a couple minutes over our time, but we'll love to have you again. And it was fantastic. So thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you guys. We will be doing a few more of these interviews. I have a few different CEOs we're talking from with a couple other companies. And so more of these will be coming out, and we will also be having Nicolo back probably within the next few weeks to discuss some of these D-SPACs. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much for your time, and we will catch you on the next Twitter Spaces. Thank you, Nicolo.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Have a great week.
Yes, absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Enjoy the week with your families. Get some time to decompress. Trading and investing can be stressful, so take a few moments off the monitor this week. Do yourselves a favor. Do your friends and family a favor, and just take it easy on Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Take it easy.